Good afternoon. Welcome back to the B&H Event Space. Today, we are talking about photographing the Olympics over the last 15 years, how technology has changed everything. Huge thank you to our host for today's event, ProGrade Digital, and I would like to welcome no stranger to this space, Mr. Jeff Gable. Jeff, what's going on, man?
Just hanging out. What does it say? Hanging out on a Wednesday afternoon.
Just another day. Another day. I was telling you before we went live today, like every once in a while an event comes along and I'm like, I can't wait to watch this. I mean, it's something that as an athlete and a photographer, you grow up and it's like the Olympics are the pinnacle of sport. Olympic photos, it's the pinnacle of sports photography. So that being said, I'm going to take up no more of your time. I will invite everybody to get your questions in. Of course, you're joining us on YouTube. So if you don't know about our YouTube, head over to the event space on there and check us out. But Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you, and I will see you in a bit for some Q&A.
All right, sounds good. And that's a lot of pressure on that lead in here. So let me, I'm going to share my screen with you and hopefully we are good. Are we good?
Looks good.
Cool. All right. So as always, I always like to build new presentations because I hate reusing them. And this one was an idea I had, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. And honestly, as I built this over the last week or so, it was incredible, even for me, to see how much has changed in technology from when I shot my first Olympics back in 2008 and now looking forward to Paris coming up. And so anyway, I'll jump right in and we'll start with let me start with this. This is sponsored by ProGrade Digital. Those are the memory cards and readers that I use. And we will talk about how that's changed. But I thank them because without them, this wouldn't be coming free to all of you. So, I just added this slide about 15 minutes ago because I was thinking about this, getting ready to present to you guys. And I thought, God, it's kind of like the athletes where, we have to train, just like and practice, and just like an athlete. Like you can't just go shoot the Olympics and pick up a camera and just do the job. So we have to be a lot like them where we have to keep in shape. I mean, I walk every day 7 to 10 miles every day just to make sure, because I know at the Olympics we're going, 20 hours a day sometimes. But just like the athletes, and I've been to the US Olympic Training Center, and it's pretty incredible the amount of technology they have in training. I mean, they've got rooms that can simulate weather and altitude, and they swallow pills that actually monitor their internal body temperature, crazy stuff. And so the technology is helping them in the suits they're wearing and how they train. And the same thing is true for us as photographers. And so again, looking back at 2008, going way back, here's some of the images I shot. This is in Beijing. This is opening ceremonies for the Summer Olympics in 2008. I remember standing. This is the one position that had a reflection. It was hot, and I mean stinking hot and humid. And we were out there for hours and hours and hours just waiting for this moment. This is using the Canon 1D Mark III back then. And this is a shot I did of Michael Phelps when he was young. This is early in his career. But this was my favorite shot from the Beijing Olympics. It just, I remember taking the shot and just having smiles, just having to witness that great swimming that he did. It was my first Olympics and trying to figure out shooting positions and where to stand to get logos and things. It was quite a learning experience for me. And I will tell you that before my first Winter Olympics, I lost a lot of sleep, just kind of in the thought process and the stress of the whole thing. So let's start diving into that. Let me just tell you that relying on technology, I have to do for deadlines. Deadlines back in 2008 were like 12 hours. And he's like, hey, if you can get images to us by tomorrow morning, that'd be great. Those days are long gone. In 2010, when I was in Vancouver, it was a 4-hour deadline to get images back to the team. 2012, it was 2 hours, which I thought was crazy. And then starting in 2014, it just got down to 15 minutes. And part of it was that the world had changed. It was less about print. It was more about digital. It was more about social media and all that. So the world changed. And because of that, the deadlines change. So I rely on every piece of technology, whether it's cameras and memory cards, readers, computers, software, my own brain has to stay fast. And actually, I'm shooting at 15-minute deadlines. Many of the pool photographers, which we'll talk about a little later, they're actually shooting with Ethernet running to the camera, and they're basically providing real-time images to a retoucher. But just the timeline and the stress of delivering, I need the tools to make that easier for me, or to even make it possible. So as I looked back at, like, okay, how have things changed? And then my initial thought was more on just the camera experience. And then I realized it's not just the cameras, it's all the accessories that go along with it, including the lenses, which I just added that slide this morning because I realized the lenses have changed as much as the cameras have. And then the memory cards and the readers, which some people will be like, oh, well, that's just an ancillary accessory, but it's not. That's a critical piece to me delivering on time. And we're going to talk about that. And then the computers, the internet, and the worlds, everything has changed. So let's go ahead in detail. So back in 2008, as I mentioned, I was using at that Olympics, I used the Canon 1D Mark III, I believe it was. It was a DSLR camera. It did not have subject tracking or eye detection or any things that we have today. What we did is we relied on that single point servo focus, which was good, much better now, but it was good. I believe that camera was a 10 megapixel camera, which at the time was great. But of course, now we're shooting at much higher resolutions. The burst speed, and this is interesting, the burst speed of this camera was 8 frames a second, which we were astounded by at the time. I remember getting this camera prior to Beijing, and I remember taking a picture of someone like doing nunchucks or whatever and spinning them around and almost making a movie of it. And my first movie camera when I was a kid was a Super 8 camera. And so it was literally 8 frames a second and we were doing video. Now, you would think that 8 frames a second is good enough, but I can tell you that, like, shooting the Olympics, it's not. I remember shooting diving, Olympic diving, and shooting that even at, I believe, 16 frames a second. I was hoping to get the fingers just entering into the water on diving, and it wasn't enough. I still couldn't get that exact moment. And so 8 frames a second, which we thought was fast, in today's technology just isn't. And we'll talk about 2024 cameras here in a second. There was no in-camera stabilization. And honestly, at the time, I was director of marketing at Lexar, and I was using the latest compact flash cards, which we thought were fast. And we'll talk about how much that has changed here in a minute. The other thing is the cameras didn't have any kind of advanced connectivity. And I originally had in this slot no connectivity, but of course that's not true because they did have USB port in the camera and stuff, but we just didn't use them. And so let's talk about how that's changed. So 2024, now we have mirrorless cameras, which I'm absolutely totally sold on. I don't use DSLR anymore. My mirrorless cameras, I use the R3, the R5, the R6, and we'll talk about what I might be using in Paris. But definitely the mirrorless has changed everything for me. The camera experience is amazing, and the ability to capture what I do is so different with mirrorless. I put in here also video. As an Olympic photographer, we are not allowed to shoot video contractually. When we sign to be a photographer at the Olympics, we're not allowed to. There's certain restrictions. There's no tripods, there's no flash, and we're not allowed to shoot any video. Remember, we can't even theoretically use our iPhone and shoot video or FaceTime because that's a broadcast from the Olympic venues, which is owned by the Olympics. So I don't shoot video there, but the capabilities of these cameras, and obviously if you're a broadcaster, they're using these cameras to shoot video, and that's dramatically changed since 2008. The biggest, I think, advantage in these newer cameras is subject and eye detection, which, like, in 3 weeks, I'll be shooting in Costa Rica in the rainforest, leading a photo tour. And man, even for that, it's incredible the way it locks in on the eyes of the monkeys or sloths or whatever we're photographing. But to do it at the Olympics, when we're dealing with the world's best athletes at the speeds at which they're performing, it is incredible, and it's a total game changer in that respect. Much higher resolution. These newer cameras, 30 and 40 megapixels versus the 10 we were doing before. Now, If we're just submitting for social media or for websites, you don't have to have that resolution. But what it does provide us is the ability to crop in really tight on an image. If I'm shooting a wide shot and I see a great scene where I want to crop in at half of the frame, it still holds resolution much better than having like a 5 megapixel image from 2008. Burst speed, we're now at, if I'm shooting in full mirrorless mode on the R3, I can shoot at 30 frames a second. I don't do that a lot because it's a lot of images to go through later. But to have that ability, like I mentioned, for certain sports like diving, to be able to crank up that speed and get the shot so I can capture that peak of action is really, really incredible. The faster card slots, which is critical to me because I want to be able to clear that buffer as fast as possible. And I will tell you, even in Tokyo, when I was using a pre-production of the R3 and I was shooting to both CF Express and the SD card slot, there were times I remember shooting gymnastics where I just couldn't, I filled the buffer and I had to wait for it to clear. That is painful. But the fact that I can now shoot hundreds of shots or many, many shots and not have that buffer hold me up is a big advantage. And faster focus speed, which is really the connection between the camera and the lens, and we'll talk about that on the lens slides. But the fact that these are locking in faster, like I have total respect for any Olympic photographer from the old days who was shooting film without autofocus and having to rack focus your lens and try to get focus. Can you imagine trying to do that on like Usain Bolt running toward you or Michael Phelps swimming toward you and trying to move the focus to get them locked in? That is respect because that's really hard to do. So relying on a much faster communication between the camera and the lens to get those shots is really critical. Better stabilization. At the time, Canon did not have in-camera stabilization, and now they do. So combining that with the stabilization on the lens, it just allows us to shoot at lower ISOs and still get a really tight, clean shot, which I really like. Going back to what I said before with the very little connectivity on the previous cameras, these new cameras have everything. They've got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and Ethernet connectors and GPS to actually track where we're actually taking the image. I don't use GPS a lot. Even when I'm shooting on photo tours in Africa or we're doing Peru coming up, I don't use it a lot, but it's there when I do want it. I don't use Ethernet. I do shoot everything to memory cards, but the pool photographers that are shooting for the agencies, they run Ethernet lines directly to them at the Olympic venues, and they plug right in. And as I mentioned before, they shoot. They don't have to do any downloading or editing. It's going to someone else up in the press center who's handling it for them. I'm a one-man show, so I do everything on my own. I shoot, I download, I edit, I get everything back to the team, and then move on. So, and I blog every day, so I have a lot going on. The lenses, um, you know, one of the things that's interesting is I've never been a huge fan of prime lenses. I mean, I love prime lenses, but for things like the Olympics, I never understood why someone would want to use like this lens here, which is a 400-2.8. So it was a fixed 400 millimeter lens. And I really like zoom. And I'll show you a couple images here in a second of why I like zoom. But I need the ability to kind of come in tight, or if I'm shooting on a pool, I want to be able to shoot on both ends of the pool if I'm at one side. So I don't want to be locked into one focal length. And so back in 2008, the quality wasn't there on the zoom lenses like they are today. And I didn't like using fixed lenses. I did use some primes, but we'll talk about that and how that's changed. The focusing was adequate and good back then, but gotten so much better now. The stabilization in the previous lenses might give you 2 stops of stabilization, and now they're up to like 5, 6, and 7. So a lot more stabilization in the lens, again, combined with the camera, means that even if I'm shaking a little bit when I'm shooting, it'll steady it out for me and give me a sharp focus. The other thing that's really changed quite a bit is the weight of the lenses, and I'll talk about what I've used in the past and what I'm planning to use in Paris. But if you look at like the 400-2.8, I believe that the new 400-2.8 from Canon is literally like half the weight that it used to be in 2008. Like I think it's gone from 13 pounds down to like 6 or something. So just having these better quality lenses with great glass, but also smaller and lighter, it just makes our life easier. And I should mention, I'm talking about the Olympics here, but this makes life, all of these things I'm talking about, are advantageous whether you're doing the Olympics or just shooting, my granddaughter in the backyard, or if I'm doing a wedding or bar mitzvah here locally, or whatever it might be. All of these things translate beyond just the Olympics, right? Which I think is important to all of you, because most of you are probably not shooting the Olympics. But these so going back to the lenses, the 2024 lenses, super high quality zooms. I've used the 200 to 400 for the last couple Olympics. I'm actually planning on changing that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But just having lots of options for zoom lenses is, to me, is huge, because instead of taking and carrying 3 or 4 long lenses, I can carry maybe 1 to do the entire job. As I mentioned before, the focus speed is much faster today and accurate. Combine that with the eye and face detection. God, it's amazing how much easier it is to capture those images that I want. I actually set up my cameras for double back button focus. So one button on the back of the camera is for face and eye detection. And the second button, which is off to the right, the asterisk, which is normally for metering, I change that button to be a center point servo focus or follow focus. So as I'm shooting, if I'm doing the Olympics, let's say I'm shooting water polo, if the athlete is facing me, I'll use the face and eye detection button. And if it doesn't lock in on them, though I needed to, or if they're facing the other direction, I'm trying to do a shot behind them, I'll just move my thumb over and hit to the asterisk button, and I'll use a different focus mode without having to change settings. It's just literally muscle memory, just moving my thumb to do it. As I mentioned, the integration with the cameras to do all the things I just mentioned has gotten just incredibly good. Matter of fact, on the old Canon 1D, I looked back at a picture of one, and they didn't even have a second button. So even if you wanted to do the kinds of things we're doing today, it wasn't even physically possible. As I mentioned, lighter, easier to carry, which is awesome. So here's a shot. This is why I like zoom lenses. So this is taken in Tokyo. This is USA women's water polo. This is Ashley Johnson, who's an amazing goaltender. Now I'm on the far side of the pool. You can tell from the angle that I'm on the other side of the pool. So I'm using the 200 to 400. This shot is at 400 millimeters. And then if they're on the side of the pool toward me, which this shot was, I can pull the lens back and shoot at 200 millimeters to get a shot that with they're closer to me. So this is why I don't like having a fixed prime, because the 400 millimeter lens might be adequate for this shot, but not for this shot. And so I like, and I'm constantly, changing, the focal length of the lens. And this is true, again, not just for Olympics, but if like last weekend, I shot a bar mitzvah, I want to shoot tight on the kid and then also shoot wide to get a different scene. So I'm a huge advocate of zoom lenses, and just having the ability to have the quality and the lighter weight and this kind of focal range is pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about memory cards. So I've got an image here of a Lexar card, because back in the day, that's what I shot. I was shooting with compact flash and SD cards. I think the highest capacity at the time was 16 gig, which we were very proud of at the time. And the speed, we'll talk about that in a second. The one challenge with compact flash cards, and for those of you who use those cards, you may remember it, they actually had like a whole 2 rows of pins for the connectors of the card. And you had to be really careful putting that into your camera and into the reader, because the pins could bend. And so the fact that today, all this newer technology and these new cards we're using, they don't have pins, they just slide in, you don't have to worry about all that. I know it sounds like a minimal thing to many people, but if you bent a pin, you lost all of your images until someone could either bend it back or you'd have to send it back. And that was a real pain. The readers at the time, which I'll talk about in another slide, they were USB 2.0, as were the internal guts of the cards. So we were moving transfer rates of 45 megabytes per second. Now, at the time, that was pretty cool. But today, man, I'll wait to this next slide. We've gone from 45 megabytes per second to 3,400 megabytes per second. This is the new CF Express 4.0 cards that ProGrade is now shipping. And capacities, I remember I told you before, 16 gig in the old days, and now up to 2 terabytes. Now, do I shoot on 2 terabyte cards? Actually, I have right here on my desk, I do have a 2 terabyte card. It's still sealed, ready. This is for the Olympics. And so I will be shooting on those. It's not my everyday card that I shoot to, but what I love is I like using it in the second slot. And I like having a super high capacity card in the second slot because I always shoot 2 cards, always. It's really nice to know that that second card is basically like an internal SSD in the camera. So I can shoot probably half the Olympics without formatting that second card. But each day I'm downloading, I know I've got the images. Eventually I could reformat that second card, but it just gives me that peace of mind knowing I have every image I've taken in the last week or two on that card. And so it's great to have those capacities. They're also lower power, which again matters because that means that the battery life of the camera lasts a lot longer. And so, and I'm very cognizant of that because when I'm shooting, I actually prefer to shoot with one battery if I can make it through a whole event, depending on the event. But I don't use the LCD on the back of the camera a lot. I'll look through the eyepiece. I don't do a lot of reviewing on the back of the camera. So I'm trying to save that power, even though I carry extra batteries with me. Believe it or not, there's times when just changing the battery gets in the way of shooting. And I should mention that, again, the Olympics is a different scene. Like if I'm shooting an event here in the Bay Area or portraits, you have time to change batteries and you have time to change memory cards. But when you shoot the Olympics, there's times when things are happening so fast that you just can't. But the transfer speed is by far the biggest thing. I talked about deadlines earlier and having a deadline of 15 minutes. Be able to transfer at these speeds is incredible. And I can tell you that they did not have this card and the new reader in Tokyo. It was still fast, but I've tried and I have on my desk here the newest card and the newest readers, and it is astonishing how fast. And I think I could probably download an entire Olympic shoot of a sport in probably under a minute or two. It's crazy. So I can get right to going to review and finding those best 10 images and getting back to the team that much faster. So readers, back in 2008, I remember being very excited about this FireWire 800 reader. This is or USB 2. We had both readers. I used the FireWire 800 because it was faster. And I thought that the speeds were great. As I mentioned, we were doing 45 meg per second. It did also have the pins on the that were going into the reader. That was the issue. The newer one now, Thunderbolt 4 and USB 4, the USB-C connector. This is kind of funny too. Even the connector is better. Now, if you remember with USB or even FireWire, it was a pain to put that connector into the computer. USB, at least half the time you go to put it in, you put it in upside down. And USB-C, there is no upside down. You just plug it in and go. Same thing with Thunderbolt. Little things like that that make life easier. But again, the main thing for me is just the speed of this. I will actually have 2 of these readers hooked up to my my MacBook, and I'll probably be downloading 2 cards at a time at these speeds. So I plan on having plenty of extra time to deliver images in Paris. Let's keep our fingers crossed. But this new reader is incredible. Okay, so now let's talk about the computers and what's changed there, because there's been a lot of changes in that respect as well. So in 2008, I was using the older MacBook Pro. It used hard drives, which seems today kind of crazy that we had a spinning platter that we're carrying around all the time. Because remember, sometimes my laptop's open when I'm helping on a press bus or whatever. It's nice to have a SSD today, which is all flash memory, nothing spinning, and all that. So, but back then it was spinning hard drives. They were slow, they were fragile, and also way lower capacity. So my drive at the time, I believe, was 320 megabytes. Today, my laptop I'm using has an 8 terabyte SSD in it. That's just crazy. It's incredible to have that. I could just download the entire Olympics to the internal drive. Way slower processors back then, which did matter. I mean, it matters for my sorting speed to try to cull through images and find the best ones, as well as using programs like Photoshop to do any retouching. I should mention that for the Olympics, we're not allowed to do a lot of retouching. I've said this in past presentations. We can crop, we can adjust exposure and white balance, but we can't do much more than that. So we're not doing cloning and adaptive healing brushes and stuff like that because it's not allowed. My internal memory was either 2 gig or 4 gig back then. Now I'm using 64 gig of RAM, which again really accelerates the processing speed and the ability to view those images that much faster. 2-hour battery life. which meant I was plugged in a lot back then. That's not the case now. It had an old CD drive in it, which of course, who uses CDs anymore? It had a decent screen on it, but not the clarity that we have today. And they were big and heavy. They're still bigger and heavier than I like. I may actually switch to a MacBook Air, the new one with the M3 processor this time. I have yet to decide that. I'm still trying to figure that out. But these newer computers have these super fast solid state drives that allow me to download from the pro grade cards and readers that much faster to the computer. Huge capacity. The processors of the computer are that much faster. Again, this matters when I'm trying to cull through images, when I'm retouching images, when I'm uploading the images, just the speed of everything matters. 64 gig of RAM, Thunderbolt 4, USB 4, so the connectivity is great. The screen resolution is far superior with the Retina displays today. So it allows me to really hone in and see, oh, this is a great image without me having to zoom into it first. Like, oops, I'm a little off on the focus. Generally, I can see on that 16-inch screen right off the bat whether it's sharp or not. Having 20-hour battery life is amazing because at the Olympics, I will tell you that there's a lot of time where I'm not in the press center. I may have the laptop at my side. If I'm shooting ringside for boxing or something, I may have the laptop right there ringside with me and don't even have time to go to the press center and plug in. So I'll just open it and start working. And then I'll go from that venue. I'll get on a press bus. I may have an hour and a half ride to the next venue. That thing's open and I'm working. And I'm talking like hardcore working with processing speeds. So it does drain the battery, but I'll still get a good 15 hours at least on these newer ones, where with that kind of computing that I was doing before, I might get 1 hour. So that's huge. Internet, even the internet's changed. Like, it's crazy that we didn't have wireless back then. Everything was wired. So in Beijing, it was a hardwire connection, hence the image that I have here. Like, you had to hardwire to your computer. The other thing, of course, in Beijing that I did not put in the presentation is China had blocked, they weren't supposed to, but they did. They blocked access to a lot of stuff for the press and they weren't supposed to. So I couldn't even blog from Beijing. And my blog has nothing, pro United States or anti-China or anything, but they blocked it. And so I had to VPN in to a friend's VPN server and then write my blogs that way. But it was also very difficult to transfer images because they blocked so many of the FTP sites. It was crazy. But again, it was all hardwired. So heavily compressed files, because at the time they're like, look, we need them quickly. So we need you to compress it way down. We were compressing to like level 1 or level 2 in Photoshop versus a level 12 or whatever. So really, really small files. Now with the newer internet, we have wireless everywhere. So all the press centers, the main press center, each press center, every venue has its own press center, all wireless. And they have an open wireless network. And then you can also pay to get an even faster wireless network if you want. And then they still have wired connection for those who want it. I don't even use it, don't need it. One of the things that started in 2016 in Rio is they started putting internet on the buses, on the press buses. And that was amazing because then I could actually do email and write a blog and post images from a press bus. I contacted the communication group, sorry, not the communication group, the transportation group for POCOG, versus the Paris Organizing Committee, and asked them if they will have wireless on all the buses. And they said most of them will have it. They couldn't guarantee it, but I'm hoping that's still the case because, man, that was awesome. Not only for work, but also because my time is so compressed, it would allow me to FaceTime back home, excuse me, make phone calls using the Wi-Fi, which was always great because sometimes I actually have downtime at the Olympics to try to at least call home. Really fast connectivity. I mean, the wireless now, even the wireless is fast enough where I can post images and I don't need a wired connection. As I mentioned, something that changed quite a bit now is for the agencies. They run Ethernet lines dedicated. So they have dedicated photo positions at every venue. And you'll see like, spools of Ethernet line run for them. So they can just plug directly in, which is pretty incredible. I don't have that luxury. Here's some shots. This is from opening ceremonies in Tokyo. I should mention also that all the white that you see in the seats, those were just cards because there were no people there. So really, we haven't had a normal Olympics without the pandemic since 2018 in Pyeongchang. And so this will be, I hope, the first Olympics where we don't have any COVID protocols. As many of you know, I did not go to Beijing for the last Olympics, Winter Olympics, because of COVID protocol. It was just crazy. So I'm looking forward to a normal Olympics. Let's hope that that happens. This is opening ceremonies in Tokyo. And some of the shots that I took, this is with the 70 to 200. And again, no one in the stands, but this is a motion pan during the equestrian. I love shooting equestrian. It's just a fun sport to shoot. And I always try to push myself. And again, with subject detection, it's nice to have the camera do the lock-in for me. And then I just have to make sure I track them at the exact right speed. This shot is the one that used here at the opening for the presentation. It's still one of my favorite shots I've ever taken. And this is a multi-exposure shot in Tokyo fencing. This is US versus Germany. And a lot of people think that I Photoshopped this. This is not Photoshop. This is in the camera. And if you have a camera, whether it's Canon, Nikon, Sony, what it might be, any of the later cameras actually have a multi-exposure mode. So what I did is I set my camera for 4 exposures. Again, we can't use tripods at the Olympics. They don't allow them. So I'm holding on for dear life with a monopod because I wanted to get the logo at the bottom without movement. And I shot in a 4 burst, waiting for both athletes to move at about the same rate. It took me about, I think, 100 times to get it right. Even the guy in the background had a little bit of movement, which is cool. He moved just a little bit. But that shot was hard to do, which makes it more fun for me. So how have things not changed? The pressure to get the shot has not changed. So yes, technology is making it easier for me, but the pressure to get that shot, to get the shot captured, and then to deliver it on time have not changed at all. I still find that gives me a little trepidation in the process, but I kind of live off the stress. This is literally 3 weeks of this every day from 8 or 9 in the morning till 2 in the morning every day. So you kind of just live on that stress. The pace is crazy. It's probably the only time I eat strictly to fuel my body, not for the pleasure of eating. And I'm usually downloading, retouching, or getting rid of images that are duplicates or bad stuff I don't need all while I'm eating. The exhaustion is real. I usually come home and I'm exhausted by the time it's over. And this one's going to be a bit of a challenge for me because I'm going to Costa Rica in 3 weeks. Then I come home for a couple weeks. Then I go to Peru, leading another photo tour, come home for 9 days, and then go to Paris. So usually I try to give myself a little bit more resting time prior to the Olympics, and that won't be the case this time. But the fun is there. And so I'm not complaining about this because I'm thrilled to be able to shoot my 8th Olympics. It's a huge honor to do it. There's very few credentials. And to also be one of the few people to do it independently. I'm not shooting for any publication, so I can go shoot whatever I want. I do shoot for the team and I have some obligations there contractually, but then when I'm done with those, I can go and shoot whatever sport I want, which is pretty cool. So let's talk about how life has changed, because it's not just technology. As I did this presentation, I realized, God, life has changed a lot since 2008. Social media, which really wasn't even a thing at the time. As I mentioned, I just started my blog in 2008. And most of the blog was actually written when I came home from the Olympics because I was new to it, couldn't post easily, just didn't have time. But now with social media, I want to be able to post every day what I'm shooting. Team USA obviously definitely wants to be able to post, and those deadlines are fast because they want to be able to say, okay, we're partway through this sport, tune in and watch the rest of it or whatever. And so they want to, it's just real time. They want to be able to deliver. So I'm posting as fast as I can, and they're posting as fast as they can. And as I mentioned before, there's less print. I mean, if you think about it, newspapers are getting smaller and thinner. Magazines are either getting thinner or going out of business, and more things are online. So that also means that they can post stuff immediately. And I've seen this at the Winter Olympics where downhill skiing, someone will be shooting up at the area where they start, at the starting position, and they're Ethernet connected. By the time that skier has gone down the entire downhill course, the person has already edited the image from the start position and it's being posted online. Like it's that kind of craziness that's happening. And I think as a society, we're just less patient than we used to be, right? We want everything instantaneously. And, and I think it's true for all of us with our phones. We just can't unplug from what we're doing. And so that impatience has an effect on the team, the media group, us, to try to meet these crazy deadlines. But with all of this technology, we can actually deliver, which is really cool. And so again, it's using the tools, it's us trying to train ourselves to shoot a bit more efficiently, which is a whole nother thing. Like I try not to overshoot when I'm at the Olympics, because if I'm shooting at 30 frames a second for everything I shoot, it would be impossible to go through all those images. So you have to be smart about how we're doing it. What sports need 30 frames a second? Which ones need 16 frames a second? What might be fine with 8 frames a second? And so trying to figure all that out is part of the process. Here's the gear that I took in Tokyo. I took a couple of the Canon R3s. At the time, the Canon R3 was not, it was announced as a technology, but not a camera that was being openly talked about. I actually outed the camera for Canon in Tokyo because I was posting images. They allowed it. I think 3 days before the Olympics, they gave me clearance to do that. And I had a couple Canon R5s. I was using the 200 to 400 for all my long shooting. The 100 to 500 or 100 to 400 I had with me if I wanted to use it for more handheld shooting without a monopod. I had the 70 200 if I was close to the action, 2470, which I think I used for that fencing shot because we're right there next to the athletes. 15 to 35 for wide angle stuff. Fisheye, which I use more for Winter Olympics and summer, but depending on when I'm shooting, I may use one in Paris. We'll see how that goes. I use all ProGrade memory cards, ProGrade digital memory cards and readers for the reasons I've already told you. I switched to them because I think that they are the best product. They only make pro products. They're not making USB drives and consumer stuff. They're making products that if you're serious about photography, you want to be using their stuff. I do carry one flash with me, even though they're not allowed at any of the venues. I can use them in the press center or in the what's called the mix zone when they're interviewing the athletes. I can actually pop a flash if I want. So I carry one with me just to have it. Of course, I carry monopods. I carry a tripod if I'm gonna do any outdoor shooting, like maybe the Eiffel Tower if they're doing fireworks, that kind of stuff. But not in any of the venues, it won't be allowed. I have my think tank bags, and as I mentioned, my MacBook Pro. This is a gear shot that I took prior to heading off to Tokyo. And I expect to have some changes, but some similarities in what I'm taking this time around. So what gear will I be taking for Paris? A lot of people are asking me if I'm going to be using anything new from Canon, and it's possible. I don't know what they're announcing. They haven't announced anything. So at this point, I'll tell you that I'll be using 2 Canon R3s, or maybe something else, and maybe a couple R5s or something else. I don't know. To be determined what I'll be shooting with there. And I'm going to change it up. I'm probably not going to take the 200 to 400 with me. They have the new RF 100 to 300 2.8. That lens with the teleadapter is really interesting to me because that would give me like that 200 to 400 equivalent at f4, but higher quality, faster focusing, lighter weight, smaller, and I could take the teleadapter off and go to 2.8. So that lens I think is going to be my go-to lens for Paris, to be determined, but I think that's the way I'm leaning. Again, I'll take a 100, 500 with me. So if I want to like go more lighter weight or shoot handheld, I'll take that one. 7200, 2470 wide angle fish, and same accessories again, ProGrade cards and readers, and the same other accessories, I think. Again, we're still a little bit ways away, but that's kind of the plan. Oh, this is my shameless plug for my photo tours. Gotta include this on every B&H presentation. So like I mentioned, in 3 weeks doing Costa Rica in the rainforest, those are sold out for this whole year. I just added 3 for 2025 and doing Peru coming up after Costa Rica. And then I got my Olympic break, come back, and then I'm doing San Francisco, which is my hometown. That's a cool one we did last year, and that's new. I've got 4 spots left for that. And then we're doing Indochina in October. I'll go back to Costa Rica in November, and then Tanzania, which I love for the Wildlife there is incredible. Then back to Costa Rica, which is, that one's new. We've already got 4 spots sold on that one. Then Greece, then Alaska, which is also new, and then 2 more to Costa Rica. So if you're interested in any of the photo tours, you can just go to jeffcable.com and you'll see a photo tours page there, and you can email me if you're interested in any of those. The blog, which I typically blog about once a week. And the Olympics, the plan is to blog every day. I try to share behind the scenes stories, what I'm shooting, how I'm shooting, what equipment I'm using, and all of that good stuff. So that's still the plan. If you want to get a hold of me, if you have any questions that we don't get answered here, you can reach me at jeff@jeffcable.com. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, it's just Jeff Cable Photography. So go ahead and like that. And then Twitter is jcable12, just because it is. I should also mention on the blog, what you can do is you can go to the blog and you can actually click on the, there's a link on how to subscribe to the blog, and you put your email address in, and then you'll get the blogs emailed to you, so you don't have to remember to keep going back to it. That is not spam stuff. It's just a blog. I don't blast people with a bunch of advertising or any of that stuff. So you're safe to do that. With that, we want to thank ProGrade again for sponsoring this. I really appreciate them and their products. Because like I said, I rely on them very, very heavily for what I do. So thank you to them. With that, I'm rolling back to you guys for any questions we have.
Awesome. Thanks again, Jeff. I'm going to get it started with the questions. I see them already coming in.
All
What
right.
else has changed? What else is digital? What is it like outside of the experience of just photographing? What is the experience like ticketing, and what areas where are you allowed? Where are you not allowed? Is there any special privilege that you guys have? Or are you guys basically just people with tickets to the Olympics that have a little bit of
No.
extra?
We're spoiled. We have separate entrances, separate
Awesome.
bathrooms, separate places to eat, separate everything. But there's tons of restrictions in shooting locations and positions, and when we shoot, how we shoot. If we want to mount a camera, if you want to mount it in the rafters, you have to be there 6 hours ahead of time. And if you want to then get your memory cards out of it, you have to wait for rafter call 2 hours after. There's lots of restrictions. You mentioned ticketing. Certain events are what they call HDEs, or high demand events. So opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies, gold medal round for like swimming, gymnastics, whatever. Certain things will be ticketed. Paris is going to be the first time. I'm glad you mentioned it. Paris is going to be the first time they're not going to do paper tickets. So in the past, I would apply for what I wanted to get up credentialed for it or ticketed for it. And then I'd go to the press center, which could be an hour bus ride away. And I go hope that I got my ticket, pick it up, and then head to wherever I was going. Paris is going to change it. They're the first ones for sustainability reasons. They don't want to produce all the paper. They're going to go digital, which means we have to have a special app on our phone for the tickets. And they've never tried it before. And the first event that's going to use it is opening ceremonies, which is not going to be in a stadium. They're going to float down the Seine River, 6 kilometers, 650,000 spectators, and they're going to test the system. So is there any trepidation there? Yes. A little worried about that. Now, the advantage will be if I don't have to go to the press center to get my ticket, I could just contact my contact there and say, did I get it up? Did I get ticketed for that event? Yes. And he just digitally sends it to me. That'd be cool. But let's make sure it works. The other thing is I was super excited about opening ceremonies because first time not in a stadium, right? Coming down the river on barges is going to be really cool. But I just watched the telecast about the Zoom call about it. And there's going to be very limited shooting positions. You're going to be limited to your zone. You may have to stand for the entire 12 hours. It's rain or shine with no place to cover. It's going to be interesting.
You're
So
earning those pictures.
yeah, we'll be earning. And I don't know. I really want the position to shoot with the Eiffel Tower in the background, but they only have like 250 photo positions there. I'm going to blog about this, but 250 positions is nothing when you have 2,500 photographers there.
Wow.
So everybody's gonna be vying for that shot.
So you guys have to basically jockey. There's no you have to get there early. You have to jockey.
Well, getting there early is not going to help you. You have to know that you have to be in the right position, or the right. They have to know who you are, and you have to have a good reason to be there. So
Wow.
I've already told Team USA what are the odds of getting one of those tickets, because remember they've got people shooting for big publications and stuff. And of course I told him, I go, remember, I'm shooting for you guys, I'm giving you the images. So we'll see, but I may or may not get it. And that's okay. Like
Mhm.
everything at the Olympics, you have to adapt. I might have planned to be in a certain shooting position for a certain sport. Like when I get to Paris, I'll go to the water polo venue and I'll say, what are the shooting positions? Because I want to shoot from here. And they go, no, that's not the approved position. Or we thought it was in the press handbook that you have, but they took it away from us. So
Interesting.
you have to just go with the flow.
Definitely. We had a good question come in. Now, with the ability to watch a high def video clip within seconds of the play, are you worried that still images will become irrelevant at some point?
It's a great question. And honestly, I think there will be a day when Olympic photography could be a thing of the past and it just is, 8K video and you're grabbing the frame off that video of the shot that you want. That could be a thing. And
Mhm.
honestly, I think it's a possibility or probability. The good news is I'll be retired at that point anyway. And so I'll have already had my fun. I mean, honestly, when I did my first Olympics or even my second one, I pinched myself like, I can't believe that I get to do this. And now doing my eighth one, I don't take it for granted. I'm still excited about it. And I was thinking, okay, maybe LA 2028, it's down the road, like, it's a 6-hour drive. I'll be there. Don't have to fly across the world. Maybe that'll be my last one. And then they announced the following Summer Olympics would be in Australia, and I love Australia. So I'm like, guess I'm doing 2032. Maybe that'll be my last one. But again, we'll wait and see if I can stay in shape for it because it's grueling it's tough on the body, mentally and physically. So we'll see.
Is it tougher mentally or physically? If you had to say one is more grueling. Wow.
That's tough mentally. I'd say.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, because yeah, definitely mentally. Because I mean, physically, I walk a lot here, and I'm used to walking a lot. No, it's the stress. Because the weird thing is, I don't know how to explain this. I'm not ever stress free. Like when I go from one venue to the next, you're stressing about getting there on time. Then when you leave that one, I'm stressed about, can I go through the images and write a blog in the time that takes me to get to the next one? Then I'm stressed about getting back and getting sleep. Then I'm laying awake at night thinking, what did I not get done that I need to get done? Then I wake up stressed, am I going to get to the venue on time? Is the press bus going to be there on time? Like it's like living in this bubble of stress for 3 weeks. So yeah, definitely mentally, now that I
It
think about that.
puts it in a lot in perspective. It's not just like, hey, a cool vacation to see a once in a lifetime event and you snap a couple pictures. It's like, no, this is like 24 hours a day taxing on your mind and your
Yeah,
body.
yeah, this it's definitely not vacation. Actually, the interesting thing about it is I'm very excited to have it in Paris for the backgrounds.
Hmm.
But you can almost take the Olympics and put it in any city. Like when I was in Tokyo, I never really saw much of Tokyo, right? I just went to the venue. Well, there we were quarantined, so we couldn't. But
Yeah.
like most of the time, it was cool, like in London, to be able to shoot the tennis, which was at Wimbledon. That was cool. And the horseback riding was in Greenwich, or like there's different like places. And that was kind of cool to go to different things like that. But you could almost drop those into any city. Like I don't get a chance in Sochi in Russia. I never saw downtown Sochi until 2 days after the Olympics. We went in for an
Wow.
hour.
Wow.
Didn't even see it.
Interesting.
In the first
Interesting.
2 weeks I was there, my press lodging, if you want to call it that, was like a couple blocks from the ocean. I didn't even know there was a sea there. And someone mentioned, I'm like, wait, there's water here? And
You're
I
just
literally
like,
walked 2 blocks. I'm like, holy cow, like it was crazy. Like, didn't even know.
wow.
Yeah.
Let's get to a settings question here from Alexander joining us on YouTube. Hello, what autofocus settings do you prefer for the R3 for shooting gymnastics? And how do you transport your photo gear via airlines?
Yeah, there's that. So I carry everything on. So I have my airport roller think tank bag, which I cram everything into. And then I wear my backpack, which is also a roller. It's so both are rolling bags. And that's what I take on the plane. If they lose my luggage with my clothes, I'll buy more clothes. And also my clothes are like, look at the way I dress. Although I am wearing a Paris Olympic shirt, but I can't dress myself, trust me. And so I don't care if they lose my clothes. I carry everything on. And also, I also rely on Canon at the press center, and I will blog this. Hopefully, I'll show how much gear they brought with them for loaners, and they have a ton. So if we break anything or need to borrow anything, it's all there for us. The other question was what settings for
Autofocus.
gymnastics.
Yeah.
Again, I use that combination of back button focus for subject detection. And if it's not locking in on them, then I'll switch over and I'll use a center point follow focus. Generally, I find that the subject detection for things like the balance beam, for for the floor exercises is incredibly good at locking in. For the vault, it does okay, but sometimes I find that I have to switch over. So this is the thing. It depends on the actual sport, and it depends on what photo position I'm in. Where am I shooting from? Because certain angles will be different. And this is why there's no easy answer to that. I try to get into a position where I have a good clean background, or with the Olympic rings in the background or whatever. But depending on the angle on that to the athlete will determine what kind of focus I'm using. It's not a clearest answer, but that's the best I can give.
Okay. Now, you said early on in the presentation, I thought it was interesting, we want to line up logos and stuff like that. How much of that, like, do you have, you're working with Team USA. Do they have a shot list? Is there anything like, hey, Jeff, these are some shots we definitely want. This is stuff that we want in. How much are you paying attention to? Okay, I have to get this. I got to get some shots with the rings. And how much of it is just getting lost in the moment, trying to get the best shot from a photographer's perspective?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely contractual things that they want. Like they'll
Mhm.
tell me, this athlete is going to play today, and she hasn't started the first 4 games. We need shots of her. So
Okay.
look for number 8 in the pool or whatever. Heck, I remember being in London, and I got a text from the team. Hey, Prince Harry's in the stands. It told me what row or whatever to shoot, and they want to get a picture of that. It might be, and it might just be a reaction like, hey, so there's a VIP there, or we need shots of this coach, or this athlete is one of the goaltenders for the water polo team was American Indian background descent, and so she's being featured in one of the magazines, and they wanted a shot of her, but she hadn't played. They said, get a shot of her on the bench. And then eventually I think they played her, and I get a shot of her. But like, they'll tell me what they need. But most of what I shoot is me determining what is the story. So if it's ice hockey and the goalie has stopped everything, has a shutout, I better have a good shot of that goalie stopping a puck. Same thing, water polo. If they block every shot, I need a shot of that goaltender doing it right. If one of the athletes has scored 5 goals, I better have a good shot of one of those goals, because they want to be able to say, hey, this athlete was incredible. So as I'm shooting, I'm thinking, along with everything else I'm thinking about, and I did a video for you guys called the 15 things I think about every time I hit the shutter button. I'm also thinking about what is the story that's unfolding in front of me, right? And so, or the team might be texting me and say, hey, this
Mhm.
is happening, we need this. So
Are you looking beforehand? Like when you go out in your preparation, are you like, hey, what storylines are there coming into the Olympics? What storylines might unfold? Is someone looking at like a historic occasion or something like that? You're aware of all that stuff, I'm
yeah, I try
guessing.
to be. I mean, clearly right now, I mean, Simone Biles is a big story, right?
Hmm.
She did in Tokyo, she had to bow out for mental health issues. That made it really interesting. I mean, I remember I was like 2 feet from her, and I'm like, why is she not getting on the beam? Why is she still in a sweatsuit? We have no idea. You guys watching TV are getting this whole backstory. We're looking at her. I'm like, and I'm listening to her talking to her friends and looking up her coach. I mean, I use a 7200 and it almost didn't focus. She's that close. And I'm
Wow.
like, what's going on? So the fact that she's coming back and dominating the way she's dominating, she's one of the big stories. Now, will I be able to get over to gymnastics and capture her doing her stuff? It depends on my other contractual obligations. I hope so, because I'd love to be there for that. But yeah, we try to, watch that. I remember in London, Michael Phelps, one of the stories was his whole cupping that he was doing,
Hmm.
all the marks on his body. So get a shot of him with all the marks on his body. So there's different things that we're looking for. Some of it's real time, you just got to figure it out. And sometimes, yes, like opening ceremonies, I've been thinking in my brain of what I want. Now, when I get there and get a different shooting position, I may have to rethink it. But I'm already like, I watched this 2 hour briefing to try to figure out, okay, if I don't get Eiffel Tower, what is the next best position I want with a cool background, right? And so trying to plan that out. So yes, there's a lot of stress in the time leading up to the games, as well as being there.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't even think about that dynamic of it's not all, I mean, some of these Olympics are way spread out. There's stuff happening at the same time where
oh
it's
yeah.
like if you're contractually obligated to be photographing this event and another event is 3 miles away and something's happening there, sometimes I guess it's just luck of the draw and it's chance at that point.
Yeah, and also just kind of, I mean, it depends on how quickly I'm delivering, because it's not just that 15-minute deadline. I also stay for another hour. So I'm contractually obligated to give them 5 or 10 great images, but I might have 30 other great ones that they're going to want. So I try to deliver 40 images or so to the team before
Okay.
I roll to the next event. Um, and then people say to me sometimes, well, why'd you only shoot 1 or 2 events today? I'm like, no, you don't realize that my transportation is not, even if it's 3 miles, it might be an hour and a half because I can't get there on a press bus. I may have to take a press bus back to the press center and then another press bus to the next venue. Now in Paris, they're going to give us unlimited public transportation cards, so we can hop on the metro, and maybe it's faster that way. But again, this is all to be determined. Even my housing, I almost didn't get housing. There was a whole mess with that. But
Mhm.
how far is the housing from the metro station, from the press bus station, which I do know all this because I researched that. All of these come into play. And so can I hit three different sports in one day? Maybe, maybe not. I might only get one. It just depends on when it is. I already have the schedule for all the water polo games. Typically, they are late afternoon, or early evening, because that way it's watchable in the morning in the US. So they try to time it that way for NBC and everybody else. And so, okay, that means I can shoot anywhere I want in the morning, but I got to make damn sure I'm back at the water polo facility an hour and a half before that game, because I can't risk not being there. So all those kinds of things. This is the stress that you kind of
Dude, I'm
alluded
having a nervous breakdown just listening to you talk, Chef.
to.
Like, as cool as it sounds, I'm like, man, this is it's a lot of stuff on the line here to
It
get
is.
everything. And you gotta, there's no, again, we talked about this before we went live today. This isn't just like, oh, hey, I'm going out in the streets and taking some photos. Maybe I'll get some shots. Maybe I won't. This is like, you're obligated to knock it out of the park.
Well, shooting is taxing, right? Physically, mentally,
Mhm.
in general. Even if I'm doing an event here, I want to do the best I can. I have to be cognizant of everything that's going on. If I'm shooting an event and grandma has not been on the dance floor, and all of a sudden grandma's on the dance floor, you have to see that and get out there and get that shot, right? If it's a corporate event and someone else sits down and new speakers up, you got to get up there and get the shot of them speaking. Like these kinds of things are always going on in your brain. It's just amplified at the Olympics because when I shoot an event here, I come home on, if I shoot all day Saturday, on Sunday, you're tired mentally, physically. But at the Olympics, it's just again day. It's like someone said, it's like shooting the Super Bowl every day for 3 weeks. There is no letdown. It's just go all the time. And it's funny because all the photographers, we all know each other because we all shoot the Olympics together and many of the same people. And the first couple of days, everybody's like, hey, good to see you. And you're all happy. By the end of the thing, you're like, get out of my way. Like you're in my way. Everybody's just mentally, physically trashed. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I saved the most relaxing question for the end here. Kyle joining us on YouTube is asking, after so many Olympics, what are you most excited about for Paris?
Um, you know, I always say I love shooting new things. I mean, clearly the opening ceremonies, as much as a challenge as that might be, could be really cool to shoot something that's not in a stadium. The challenge of that is if you're in a stadium, you see everything, and I can photograph the entire opening ceremony. I don't know how I'm gonna do it. It's a 6 kilometer stretch. Am I only gonna get a snippet of what's happening, or are they gonna be floating the entertainment down on barges? That I don't know. Um, I'll find that out. So that's kind of cool because it's so different. And then new sports like breakdancing, an Olympic sport, go figure. You're like, okay, I want to try to shoot that. So trying to shoot new sports, or shoot in a different way using new camera gear, new lenses is really fun. So every Olympics, I just try to push myself to either find something different or new, to shoot it in a new way, to find, like you said, a new story that's interesting. I try to show a lot of the behind the scenes because I know a lot of people on the blog are fascinated by what it's like to be a photographer at the Olympics. So I look for some of the craziness that happens. Like, and trust me, there's been some absolute crazy stories. Like I remember being at an Olympic venue in Russia, and literally, I'm not kidding, if we went to the bathroom, there was a hole in the ceiling of the bathroom that went to the venue. And if someone looked down, put their drink down at their seat and looked down, they would look into the bathroom. And I didn't blog it. And I'm mad at myself because that would be
Uh,
hysterical
yeah.
to post. But like craziness like that stuff behind the scenes is really fun. So I like to share that because if it's just for seeing the athletes, they can watch it on TV. I want to show from a photographic perspective what it's like to be there. So that's kind of my goal.
That's awesome. And that's interesting for, yeah, like for other photographers to see, because most of us, this is the closest we'll ever get to seeing what the experience is like. You know, we see it on TV, we see it in publications, but hearing you talk about it, hearing the stories, hearing what it's like to actually do it is a whole nother story.
Yeah, I get that on the blog a lot. I mean, people, right, the blog traffic, which is averaging 80,000 readers a month, during the Olympics, we go to over 500,000.
Wow.
And people tell me that they follow along because it's as close as they're going to get to the Olympics. And I do share the good, the bad, the ugly. I mean, when crazy things have happened, when that guy lost my credentials in Korea, and that was a nightmare. And I shared
Mm.
it and ended up being my most read blog post of those Olympics. I hated every second of it. Now it's the one thing I remember the most about that Olympics. And so, it is sharing, and I know I'm lucky to do it. I don't take it for granted. And I do love sharing. I mean, I'm passionate about what I do, and it's fun to share that.
I love that. Well, Jeff, we always love having you on. You're one of the hardest working, most experienced people out there, and you always just you bring it. It's fun. It's fun listening to you. It's stress. I was about that. You got me over here wanting to curse. It stresses me the heck out. Just here thinking about it, but it's awesome. So wishing you luck. You always knock it out of the park. I'm looking forward to see what you do. A huge thank you to, of course, you for sharing your expertise as always, and ProGrade for sponsoring today's event. All of our viewers out there, any closing words, Jeff?
No, just for those of you out there that are shooting whatever you're shooting, just have fun doing it. I mean, like you mentioned, it's stressful for me, but it's also a lot of fun. And I mean, I have fun in everything I shoot. And I think just have that passion and enjoyment. Is make sure that comes through in your photos.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, always good linking up with you, man. Looking forward to seeing the results, and to all of you out there, thanks
Well,
for
we have
tuning
part
in
two.
as always.
We do have part two of this, which we're going to do after the Olympics. So we'll definitely come back
Awesome.
and talk about what it was like.
Awesome. So if you don't get a question in now, start getting the gears turning for because I know things in my head that I'm like, I don't want to put any more pressure on it, but I'm interested. I see that shot, the shot we led with the motion, and you're talking about breakdancing, and I'm like, I just want to see what you do. I just want to see what you do. So
Let's see what this crazy brain
let's
comes
see
up
what
with
that crazy
next.
brain comes up with, man. Awesome. Jeff, good having you on. We'll talk to you soon then. And good luck with the Olympics, and to all of you out there. That's it. That's all we got for you today. You're gonna have to go find your own entertainment the rest of the day. Another edition of B&H Event Space now in the books. Catch y'all next time.